Hello and welcome to the Public Sector I Heart You podcast. I'm Rebecca Davis and today I'm joined by Emma Bennett, Chief Executive at Walsall Council. Thank you for joining us, Emma.
Thank you, Rebecca.
So firstly, tell us a little bit about Walsall because a lot of our listeners might not know where you are and what the council covers in its geography.
So Walsall is a borough in the West Midlands, in the metropolitan West Midlands, borders Birmingham, Staffordshire, Wolverhampton. We're a borough with about just under 300,000 residents, a borough of two halves really in terms of our demographics, a real rich industrial history that we're very proud of, diverse borough, but also with lots of challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So what drew you to working at Walsall?
I'm local, so I suppose that was the biggest pull. Lived just outside of Walsall and was born and brought up there. Walsall was a town really close to my heart as I grew up. It was the town that, I would, as I was growing up and getting independence, was the place I'd catch the bus to go to the cinema, to socialise, to go out and about. So really close to my heart. I suppose I feel like I've grown up in Walsall, and so when the chief exec role came up, it was a role really that I couldn't turn down.
Do you think being local helps? I know a lot of chief execs move around the country and sort of move to different localities, but sometimes having that place in your heart makes a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, I think particularly, I suppose, for your first chief exec role, I think it makes a big difference to our councillors, having somebody really local, but also to many of our staff and to the local residents that we support. I suppose somebody being local, knowing the place, sounded like you come from the place, and being able to talk about the place with that passion and that real life experience, lived experience, makes a difference to people.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up in a chief executive role. What was your sort of career path in sort of a short summary of how you navigated your way there?
Okay, so I'm a social worker, children's social worker by background, proud to say, and still introduce myself as that. So obviously always worked in local government as a social worker, and just literally worked my way up. Never had any real aspirations to be a chief exec, but joined the aspirant chief exec programme that Penna run, mainly I think just to, not with the chief exec role in mind, but maybe just to get me to think about, was that something that I was interested in? I'd become exec director for families, so was responsible for children's services, adult services and public health all sat underneath me, and I suppose it was what next, and where do I go next? And so chief exec was one of the potential routes, and that programme just gave me the opportunity to really think about, was it something that I was interested in? What skills did I have to transfer? And so became a little bit interested in it through that, and then the Walsall role came up, and it right time, right place. I wasn't at a point in my career where I wanted to move very far. My children were still teenagers, and I suppose again going back to my answer around just that passion and being local was something that I just thought I'd never have the opportunity again to be, chief exec in a place that was so close to my heart.
Yeah, I mean, coming from that front line role, really, of actually really working directly with communities in a social work role, how do you feel that's sort of changed? Because you become much more removed from that direct ability to connect, but how do you still keep that connection?
I'm still passionate about being visible, being out and about in our communities, whether that is through, links with partners, voluntary community sector, and making sure that, I am seen, I am accessible, I am visible, or whether that's through the teams that I'm responsible for and getting myself out and about and seen through then. Those connections through some of the opportunities we have in terms of hearing lived experience of people. Through the councillors, because obviously councillors are there on behalf of our residents, and so I suppose there's multiple angles. I always come out feeling really enthused when I've had a day when I've had that connection with our residents or with people that we're supporting. But you find that, I suppose, that that connection through other routes.
Yeah. No, it's a real benefit, isn't it, to be able to actually get out and feel and see what people are experiencing and what their views of the council are. How do you encourage your teams to do that? Because it's not just you, is it? It's trying to make sure everyone is feeling that pulse of the borough.
Absolutely, and I think that's where a bit of my social work background comes into play. So, throughout my social work career, in social work, we always talk about having a grip on frontline practice, having that grip on operational services. So encouraging our senior leadership team to do just that. We're actually just having a conversation at the moment because our children's services do what we call practice weeks, which is really about back to the floor, back to the ground, across the board, senior leadership really going out there and shadowing and working with alongside social workers to see what they're doing. So we're just starting to have a conversation about how we might do something like that across the council. How would my exec director, who's responsible for waste services and grass cutting, go back to the floor and really get a connection about what we're doing and what are the experiences we're receiving. I think co-production, engagement, that participation, the really prioritising the voice of our residents in everything we do is really important. So making sure we, as an organisation that is prioritised and embedded across everything we do. And again, yesterday we've just had a resident survey go out, first one that we've ever done in Walsall, or certainly for the last 10 or 15 years. And again, just hearing the responses back and you get that feel about what it's like living in Walsall really, really impacts on what we do as an organisation.
And it creates an identity, doesn't it, and gives you that momentum to transform and change. Now, I know local government's challenging at the moment. There is definitely financial challenges. There's a whole range of other societal challenges that we're battling with as a sector. But where do you see the opportunities in that? Because for every challenge, there's an opportunity, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think, I think those opportunities are about how we work as an organisation. So a big passion for me was thinking about that one Walsall approach as opposed to people working in silos, whether that's in the council or whether that's as a partnership. In Walsall, we did a lot of work a couple of years ago to create a 2040 vision, so a vision for Walsall in 2040. Big piece of engagement with stakeholders, with residents about what they wanted the borough to look, to feel, to be. And as a partnership, we worked together to drive that forward. So the opportunities that we've got working in partnership, one of the things that I'm leading on behalf of the West Midlands chief execs is some work around public sector reform. And I think, again, there are opportunities for there. Yeah, we've all got our key priorities but actually we need to almost start from a blank page and think about how we can do things differently with the resident at the centre of that. I think there are financial challenges, but with that, it gives us that opportunity to think about where transformation, innovation, creativity might fit. Just been talking, haven't we, as a group of chief execs about young people and how we can create, organisations and make the public sector a sector of choice for young people. So just thinking about that mix and those how we really encourage different people to play a part in what we look like.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the huge draws of local government is that we have an ability to work with so many different partners. Unlike in the private sector, absolutely, where you wouldn't work with competitors, no. We see partnership as the strength. How do you work with strategic partners and draw those into the council work?
So I chair what we call our 2040 partnership, our Walsall 2040 partnership. So and that's something that's quite unique, I think, to Walsall. I'm not sure every place has that. So, all key strategic leads from across our partners sit around that table. We've refreshed it over the last 18 months. We've made sure we've brought some representations in from things like education, from businesses, to really try and have that richness of voice. So a lot of the conversations are undertaken in that environment, just making sure I've got the key relationships. I regularly meet alongside us having those meetings, just half-hour catch-ups with my key partners, just to, because a lot of this is about the individual relationships you've got with people, isn't it? And how you then encourage that throughout your organisation and vice versa. And then I suppose my role in some of the other environments, so I make sure, I've got a role in our economic forum, so visible to some of the key businesses we've got in Walsall. I represent the Black Country local authorities on our ICB. So I think it's how you carve up your time, and for me, a big part of my time is the externally facing stuff as much as the internally.
I know the breadth of what chief executives cover is huge. How do you manage that space of perhaps being in areas where it isn't your professional background and there are other experts in the room? Just tell me a little bit how you manage that.
So I think probably that was one of the biggest things that concerned me, having always worked in an environment that I knew a fair bit about. I describe myself as a bit of a control freak at times, and part of, as I've said, part of that social work profession is always having that grip. So lifting yourself up as in terms of some of the different roles that I've had was something that I've had to work hard at. Trusting the people that you've got around you is a big thing. So, building the team around you, making sure that actually they're better than you, because you rely on the people that you've got around you. To have the expertise, and the higher up you get, the more that you need to recognise that you haven't got the expertise of everything. You need to know a little bit of everything, but not that breadth. So the importance of your leadership team, the culture of that leadership team. There's something for me, as I said, about really promoting that one Walsall, one council approach, being clear about my expectations. So there is something about no surprises. I'd rather people tell me things that actually I might not need to know than not tell me it and me find out through a counsellor or through the media. And then, clear things like performance information, how we use our senior leadership team and what we bring there. Since I've been in Walsall over the last couple of years, we've widened our senior leadership team. So it isn't just our exec directors and our statutory directors that sit around that table. We've widened it to all of our directors. And actually that has really brought a richness of conversation, but just a better shared knowledge about everything that we're doing.
It's great succession planning as well, isn't it, to do that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there anything where you think, looking back to when you started at Walsall in that chief exec role, that a piece of advice you wish someone had given you, where you thought, it would have been really helpful if I'd just, someone had just said to me?
I think probably the main bit for me, and I recognised going into the role that the politics and politicians would have a big part to play. I don't think I quite expected it, as much as it has, and I think that can happen anywhere at any point. We know there's a lot of change happening at the moment. There's a lot of instability in terms of politics both nationally and at a local level, and I think that's probably been my biggest learning curve. Just the amount of time that the politicians, the local councillors, and takes up.
Yeah.
And just how bizarre my role can be. So, yesterday, 1 minute I'm in the senior leadership team. The next minute I'm talking about a significant staffing issue. The next minute I'm talking about a choir playing at our remembrance service. Just so extreme.
It's the sheer variety, isn't it? No day's the same.
No.
I think that's the attraction in some way, isn't it? Yeah. But then actually other days you think it would be nice to just have a quiet day.
Yeah.
The politics within local government is something which has always been there. I think it ebbs and flows, doesn't it? The challenges which play out on a national scale often play out locally as well. How do you manage that in terms of a chief executive role where you are there to serve all members? And I think that's, for anyone coming into the sector, that is probably something that is very unique.
Yeah, I mean, being really clear about what my role is, what my statutory role and responsibilities are, and being really clear about that with members. Being really clear about the relationship I've got with the leader, us being really clear about expectations on each other, how we're going to work together. But then what my relationship is with the other leaders of the other groups that I've got, I make sure I see them on a one-to-one. and my relationship with broader members. So one of the things that, when I started, that I did it, I suppose, really as an opportunity to get out and about in Walsall, but also to meet, all of our councillors, was the ward walks, and how I take the time to make sure that, any new councillors that come in, that one-to-one with me, and that offer of support, and being clear about what my role is.
I know the role can be very all-encompassing. How do you put boundaries in place so that you actually get to step away from the laptop, the phone, and work?
It's hard, if I'm honest. Having a great exec support team around me makes a big difference. Protecting my time, and just trying to blot out some time to make sure that I do that. I suppose for me, being really clear about that work-life balance and boundaries. The way I do it, so there's a couple of things I do. I really prioritise. I try and exercise regularly, but I do it in the morning. So really trying to prioritise that, and making sure that, my team, and there are sometimes you can't do it because there are things that are outside your control, but where it isn't, making sure they prioritise that time in the morning so I can do what I need to do. I'm really then pretty clear that I'm happy to work, later when it happens, and then lots of the political meetings obviously happen. But of a weekend, Friday, come 5:30, 6:00, that's it, and then I don't do anything of a weekend. Of course, I'm at the end of the phone, and of course, I expect to be contacted if there are things, but I don't really do anything of a weekend. I really prioritise that time.
Yeah. And I know, because of the nature of how local government works, with often late night meetings, early meetings, it feels there's not enough hours in the day. I think that's sometimes disadvantage women, particularly stepping into senior roles. We have seen that dial shift slightly, but there's still a big gap when you look around, the region, about senior posts. How have you sort of stepped into that role and seen yourself become an advocate really for female chief executive?
I think being open and honest about, it is tough out there. There are these expectations. You do step into a role, and probably because my background is social work. Social work and social care is pretty female dominated, even at a senior level. Long hours, high expectations around that. But it's probably only since I've stepped into the chief exec role that it's the starkness of, that lack of diversity, the lack of females at a chief exec level really sticks out. So, promoting women to really think about what they can achieve, and to, really encourage them to get into these roles is really important to me. So anything that I can do to support that, being open and honest about my journey, being open about some of the challenges, being open and honest about where I am now, still have that imposter syndrome sometimes, still feel that but actually, I suppose, encouraging people to push yourself into your uncomfortable areas, and just thinking about, as an organisation, how we can really encourage women to be the best they can, and it is something that's really important to me through my workforce strategies.
I think it's an area where, as a sector, we perhaps don't do enough on. Other sectors have much more targeted programs, development, wraparound support, recognising some of the nuances of gender and how that plays out in senior roles. Do you think we need to do more as a sector?
Absolutely, I think we could do more, and I think, I suppose it falls upon our shoulders to do it. So, more than happy to play a part in that. And I think we don't do it enough. We sort of accept that it is how it is, don't we? Rather than, and again, this is about what we prioritise and being purposeful in prioritising some of those things.
I mean, so talking about the future for local government, what are your hopes for the sector over the next 5 years?
A better funding model. through the settlement. I mean, really welcome the mood music around that at the moment. Really welcome a multi-year settlement. Clarity around local government's role and recognition around local government's role. You know, I'm local government through and through. Have always worked in this sector and wouldn't ever really think about anything else, because I just think we provide such a breadth of services to our residents, to people. It's really important. So recognition of that, opportunities, I think, to consider a more innovative approach. I'm really passionate in terms of thinking about what are those opportunities that public sector reform might bring for us. And I hope that, you know, we can all start to think about being proactive, and that what sits in that prevention and early intervention area, as opposed to constantly responding to crisis, which is it feels that we are.
Yeah, and I think for me, local government, there's such variations in geography. If you've got one council which is doing particularly well, others which aren't, how can we sort of level that up as a sector?
I think working better together. I think we talk a lot about working better together, but we're still quite parochial around what we do. And when we do things well, there's almost a bit of a reluctance either to shout about it because it might be seen as, well, you're doing all right, but we're not, or almost that fear around, you know, the workforce and will that mean that we'll lose people, or so I think being better at recognising that everywhere has got some pockets of good practice, and how can we share that more, and giving some time for that. I think it's really easy for people just to get submersed in their place, and only their place. And I suppose you need to really prioritise things like these regional events in terms of really thinking about what we can do better together.
Absolutely. Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Public Sector I Heart You podcast. We look forward to seeing you again.